Good day everyone. The first proper video I made after Civ 7 released was talking about how Civ 7 didn't need a fourth age, and as we sit on the cusp of what could very well be the announcement of Civ 7's first expansion, I'm here to prosecute this idea almost 2 years later. Does Civ 7 need a fourth age, and why I think it most certainly does not? Firaxis will be hosting a developer panel at PAX West in a couple weeks time, and for what it's worth, I'll hopefully be streaming this here on YouTube, so feel free to tune into that. But it seems like they're hyping this panel up a fair bit, and in particular, the most recent community announcement they made stated that in the coming months, we'll be back with some announcements that we think herald some giant leaps forward for the game. Now, Firaxis always likes to drop little hints throughout their announcements, and using the phrase giant leap is pretty specific. I think it's fair to say an obvious reference to Neil Armstrong's famous moon landing quote, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." So it definitely seems like we'll be getting something relating to space at this dev panel, which we can probably take to mean one of two things. They'll be expanding the current 3-age structure to go beyond the current Cold War era timeline that the game finishes on in the modern age, or a brand new 4th age will be introduced altogether, which can handle the space age and beyond, where we can have giant death robots and all those sorts of futuristic elements. Now, as a side note, I do hope this includes the return of the satellite layer from Beyond Earth, one of the few good ideas I liked from that game. Now, although I think option 2 is much more likely and a 4th age is probably inevitable, I think Firaxis has got themselves into a bit of a sticky situation here. It's no secret that the community reaction to Civ 7 has been pretty mixed overall, and a common complaint that gets brought up is that the game is incomplete because it ends before you get to present day and beyond, and this was done deliberately so that they can sell it to us later in an expansion. Now granted, this is not a belief I share, not in the slightest. I don't really think that there's an arbitrary time period that a Civ game has to cover to be complete. I don't really care for the futuristic stuff like giant death robots, and in the same way I don't really care that Civ games start at agriculture instead of as a hunter-gatherer tribe. I just want the most fun gameplay experience, and I don't think that games like Old World are inherently worse just because they cover a more focused time period. But to address the main point of this video, why do I think a 4th age is a bad idea? Well, when you get down to brass tacks, adding in a whole new 4th age means you'll now presumably have to sit through the full modern age timeline as with the previous 2 ages, and those turns take a long time. Your empire is going to be pretty sprawling by this point, and you'll be up to your 3rd round of building as well. Now you're telling me I finally get through to the modern age and I have to do it all again and build my empire up for the 4th time this game? I think that personally that's just a step too far and would all but guarantee that this already sort of tenuous age reset mechanic would end up overstaying its welcome with players. Not to mention that a single playthrough of Civ 7 at this point would probably last, in the realm of 600 to 700 turns, which is just insane to me. As it stands, Firaxis could easily flesh out the modern age to include the later years of history, so pretty much everything after the first crude spaceflight, all the way to futuristic stuff like giant death robots and whatnot. There's no reason, in my opinion, to have a whole new age reset just to include these things. Now, they could make it so that going from the modern age to the information age, if that's what they call it, won't act like the previous transitions. Perhaps your buildings won't decay, perhaps your units, relationships, and city-states could all stay as they are. But that begs the question, why have the 4th age at all? Instead, I believe we should do as we have done before in all previous Civ games and flesh out the previous ages, particularly the modern age and their associated victory conditions. Test of Time allowing you to win in the exploration age was ultimately a step back in my view, and I hope that victories are a major focal point for any future expansions and updates. Just take a look at the Civ 6 tech tree at launch compared to present day, and it's clear how much work Firaxis put in to make the gameplay denser, not longer. I want to grapple with a wider variety of decisions on each turn. I'd prefer more depth, not a wider puddle. Thinking longer term, I also believe that the amount of overhead a 4th age would create going forward would be immense. Civ 7 already has a ridiculous amount of civs for its stage in the life cycle, and with the Test of Time update, they've added essentially 3 sets of abilities and social policies for every civ in the game. Not to mention the civs in Civ 7 have a lot going on, far more so than previous Civ games, and with leaders and civs decoupled, they also have to consider every possible leader combination and how they could break the game when designing new civs. And I feel like pretty quickly the whole system is going to collapse under its own weight as it becomes exponentially harder to maintain that house of cards. What I mean is that at launch, Civ 6 had 18 civs, and by the end had more than 50. Now considering Civ 7 launched with 31 civs and already has over 40 before its first expansion, we can assume there are a lot more to come. But the problem is, when Civ 6 released their 50th leader, let's say Age of Steam Victoria, They still only had to consider how her abilities would interact with exactly one Civ, England. But when Civ 7 releases their 50th leader, they're going to have to consider how that leader's abilities could impact or break the game with like 100 other Civs, which each have potentially 4 sets of age-specific abilities. All I'm going to say is good luck. Also, I do feel like this could potentially be a tremendous amount of effort to have an expansion focused on an age that most players will never make it to, although I will say this is very on brand for Civ 7's big goal to have players finish games instead of restarting a new game when they know they've won halfway through the Renaissance era. But hey, those are just my thoughts, and don't get me wrong, this is in many ways a pretty unimaginative take from myself, as a major update to the game could completely change up what an age transition even means on a base level. I'm just assuming that we'll still be doing stuff like overbuilding, collecting victory points, starting new triumphs, but this very well could not be the case. I'm making this assumption on the basis that a bunch of these systems just got overhauled with a Test of Time update, so I wouldn't think they'd redesign them again a few months later, but who knows, we'll just have to wait and find out. Ultimately, it'll all come down to the ideas that they bring to the table and the execution of those ideas. Based on the overall vibe I get from the community, I think I'm fighting a losing battle here. So what do you think? Should Civ 7 commit to a 4th age or double down and flesh out the existing 3 ages? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and thanks for watching. Thank you as always to the channel members who support me month to month, which is Carsius, Interpaladin, Awesome DayZ, Chase Bandy, Tronty Shamal TV, Chris1 Mac, and JLA7. Your support is very much appreciated.
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.